1979 and today, there have been 29 different car manufacturers who have competed in the NASCAR Cup Series, and more in other NASCAR series. Some companies like Ford and Chevrolet have become synonymous with NASCAR, while the connection between others is less likely. Some are downright unexpected. This list will try to rank the most unlikely cars to ever compete in NASCAR from a historical standpoint, and also by how just out of place they were. A Porsche 911 might seem normal on a road course. Sliding around a half-mile
Porsche NASCAR
is what earns its place on the list. We'll get to that in a moment.
Ford Edsel, number 10.
They'll know you've arrived when you drive up in the 1958 Edsel. The car
Ford.
That's truly new, from nameplate to taillights.
When Ford introduced Edsel in 1958, it was advertised as a new car for the future. Today, it is considered one of the biggest flops in automotive history. Introduced in the middle of a recession with radical styling, after 3 years of poor sales, the Edsel was discontinued, and Ford lost the equivalent of $2 billion. But the Edsel briefly had its place in NASCAR. In February 1958, Duke DeBreeze made headlines when he became the first driver to enter an Edsel in the Grand National race at Daytona Beach. He failed to make the race. Joe Weatherly entered that year's Daytona Modified race in a 1939 Ford, powered by an Edsel motor. He was 68th fastest in qualifying, but also failed to start the race. When the first Daytona 500 was held in 1959, an Edsel was in the field. Paul Bass drove a convertible Edsel and was leading all convertibles in the field after 50 laps when a fuel filter was left off at a pit stop and the engine caught fire. He finished in 46th. And finally, 1 year after the brand was eliminated, Mike Sathoff drove a 59 Edsel at the Marchbank Stadium in California in March of 1961. He finished 19th, what was his only NASCAR race and the last for an Edsel.
Wow, that's not bad.
Number 9,
Jaguar.
While NASCAR was formed as a competition of American-built stock cars, there were rare occasions where European cars were invited to race too.
Jaguar in
Beginning
NASCAR?
in the early 50s, NASCAR would hold one points-paying cup race per year where the American cars would take on European cars. The International 200, as it was usually called, would build fan interest by seeing added competition between diverse manufacturers. Driving the international cars were racers from local sports car clubs, who in many cases never drove in another NASCAR race. The first International 200 was held at the 1 Mile Dirt Circle in Langhorne, Pennsylvania in June 1950.
Oh, the oval.
6 Jaguar XK120s filled the field. Canadian Lloyd Shaw put his Jaguar on the pole over Dick Rathman's Hudson. Rathman won the race, with the top finishing Jaguar taking 6th. The following year, the international race was held at the Linden Airport in New Jersey, NASCAR's first ever road course race. The European cars had a much better chance. In a Jaguar, Al Keller won the race, with another 3 Jaguars in the top 6. That race at Linden Airport was the last Cup race for Jaguar, but not the last NASCAR-sanctioned race. One day before NASCAR made their debut at Road America in August 1956, they held a one-off event for cars with engines of 3,500 cc's or smaller. This attracted entries such as 4 Volkswagen Beetles, 9 Renaults, and was won by Paul Goldsmith in a Jaguar Mark 7.
So, wow, French cars and English cars, wow.
Number 8, Austin Healey.
Oh, the Healey's a nice color car.
Break, NASCAR's International 200 returned.
The Healey's a nice car.
Held Bowman Gray Stadium for 4 years between 1960.
Austin Healey's a nice little car.
In 1954, there was 1 Austin Healey in the international race at Linden. In 1961, there were 3 Healeys, including 1 Sprite.
Ooh!
Bug-eyed headlights.
The Sprite's a nice car.
There were 3 Sprites in the field.
Sprites are nice cars.
It was a tough track for the Healey.
That's a Barbie owned a Sprite.
Leads 15th out of 23 cars in August 1961. He was 15 laps behind the race winner.
That's not bad.
Number 7.
MG.
In 1954,
ooh, MGs are nice cars. Healey and MG were nice cars.
But the British car with big fenders was even more out of place in 1960 at Bowman Gray.
The Healey was pretty.
Smokey Cook drove an 8-year-old 1952 MG at the Bull Ring, which lasted only 1 lap before falling out with steering problems. The next year, Robert Berrier drove a 54 MG. and lasted the entire race, finishing 13 laps down in 13th place.
That's not
By the
bad.
final International 200 in 1963, Cook was the only international car in the field. His MG completed only 12 laps before overheating problems knocked him out.
Alfa Romeo.
Alfa Romeo. In
Those suck.
1968, NASCAR created the Grand Touring Series for smaller pony cars like the Ford Mustang, Chevy Camaro, and Mercury Cougar. But the GT Series was also born as a two-class series, one for cars with big engines, and also a category for those with engines under 2 liters in size. This opened the door to small European cars, ones you wouldn't expect to see in NASCAR, like an Alfa Romeo. Before the GT Series, one Alfa made a Cup Series start in the 1962 International 200 at Bowman Gray. Bill Block made only 32 laps and finished in 22nd. Now at GT 6 years later, the Alfa was a rare car as well. The GTA was a good car in rally competition, but it didn't transfer well to oval tracks. Bill Barnes drove one at the half-mile dirt Columbia Speedway in May 1968. He started last and crashed out of the race. Casper Combs drove the car instead of Barnes at the half-mile Richmond Fairgrounds in June and fell out after only 7 laps. Barnes was back in the car at the Daytona Road Course on the 4th of July, but didn't even complete a lap with ignition troubles. Several NASCAR contenders among this group. The 1969 Grand Touring season started on the Daytona Road Course. Don Yanko won the race driving a Camaro. Also in a Camaro was Richard Childress, who well before Talladega made his NASCAR debut and finished 13th. Coming home 16th was Dennis Werrell, who also made the final start for an Alfa in NASCAR. Number 5, Porsche. Of the cars in Grand Touring's under 2-liter category, class in the field was the Porsche 911. As odd as it sounds today, NASCAR races used to feature Porsche 911s sliding around half-mile dirt tracks like Richmond and Columbia. Legendary road racer Peter Gray entered a Porsche 911 at big tracks like Darlington and Rockingham, while the main Porsche driver for the series was Jack Ryan, a Volkswagen dealer from Atlanta.
That trio of Porsches is still running well. Peter Gregg at number 59 is in the 5th spot. The other 2 are 1 lap out.
In the 1966 24 Hours of Daytona, Ryan entered a 65 Porsche 911, the first year for the new model. Ryan's car drove a consistent 24 hours and won the GT 2-liter class, the first win in any kind of racing for that model. In 1968, he upgraded to a 67 Porsche and chased the NASCAR GT Championship. Ryan's best finish was 4th at the Kingsport Speedway, and he finished 3rd in the overall point standings, based off a series-leading 16 top 10 finishes. Ryan returned at 69, but after only 2 races, NASCAR eliminated the under 2 category due to a lack of entries. In that last race, Ryan's was the only entry in that category.
That's why he won.
Number 4,
Citroen
ID19.
Ooh, Citroen.
NASCAR's first race at Riverside was in June 1958 as part of the Pacific Coast Late Model Division, now known as the ARCA West.
Oh.
The 500-mile race was like previously mentioned races in that it featured a class for international cars. Of those in the race, by far the best were a pair of Citroen ID19s driven by Bill Jones and Ralph Roberts. In the race that took 6 hours to complete, the Citroen's excellent fuel mileage allowed them to only make 2 pit stops. The drivers had no mechanical problems and both completed 160 laps to finish 1st and 2nd in class and 18th and 19th overall. Number 3, Tucker. The Tucker car caused a stir in the late 40s when it was introduced. A rear-engine car with 3 headlights, the Tucker was an innovative car that threatened to shake up the automotive industry. It was believed the big 3 automakers and U.S. Senator Homer Ferguson conspired to eliminate this threat. It came after Tucker's leadership with charges of stock fraud. After a well-publicized trial, a jury quickly decided in January 1950 that the company did nothing wrong. It was enough to bury the Tucker after only 51 cars were built. So it was notable just 4 months later when 24-year-old Joe Marola qualified a Tucker for NASCAR's Poor Man's 500 at the half-mile Canfield Speedway in Ohio on Memorial Day. A broken axle on the first lap caused a last-place finish for the Tucker. The car and driver returned in July at Rochester, where it again failed to complete a lap. and never returned to NASCAR. It was later determined that the car itself was the fourth Tucker ever built. Today, that exact car has been repainted and is in the Toyota Museum in Japan, worth well over $2 million. Number 2.
Mini Cooper.
In June 1968, fans at the Grand Touring race at Richmond saw a Porsche 911, an Alfa Romeo, and strangest of all, a 1967 Austin Mini Cooper sliding around a dirt track. Walter Novak drove the Mini at Richmond and finished 9th, 27 laps behind the winner. 2 months later, Larry Newton drove the Mini at Darlington, but fell out after only 1 lap. And coming in at number 1, the Volkswagen Beetle. While the international races attracted cars like Jaguars, MGs, Aston Martins, and Austin Healey's, none of them were nearly as out of place as the Volkswagen Beetle that was entered in the first International 200 at Langhorne in June 1953. Dick Hagee's Volkswagen finished 19th, so far off the winner's pace that it's unknown exactly how many laps he even completed. 2 years later, another Volkswagen competed in the